Most mornings inside the Rivera and Associates building were the same. Quiet hallways, soft lights flickering awake, the smell of fresh coffee slipping under office doors before any lawyer had even arrived. For Jose Daniel Jimenez, the janitor the staff barely noticed, mornings like that were a kind of peace, a routine he depended on, a world where no one expected too much and no one cared too deeply. But that morning carried a small shift in the air, so small most people would have missed it. A soft tremor, a quiet signal that something ordinary was about to break open, and a life that had been stuck in place for years was finally going to move. It started with a whisper. "Oh no, not today. Please, not today," a woman murmured from down the corridor. Jose paused mid-stride, his cart parked beside him. He wasn't the type to eavesdrop, but there was something about her voice, tight, embarrassed, and fighting for composure, that pulled him toward her before he even realized he was walking. She stood with her back slightly turned, hand gripping the side seam of her tailored pants. A fresh rip ran several inches down the leg, sharp, undeniable, and unfortunately placed. The look on her face said everything. She was supposed to be somewhere important, somewhere soon. Her eyes lifted when she finally noticed him, and for a split second Jose saw something he rarely saw directed at himself in this building: vulnerability. "Good morning," he offered gently. She blinked, startled but trying to remain composed. "Good morning. I'm sorry. It's just, this is the last thing I needed today." Jose didn't need her to explain. He'd seen that expression on dozens of faces over the years, the look of someone who felt like life had chosen the perfect moment to collapse a little. But what he didn't know, not yet, was that this woman, this stranger in a navy blazer, held something more than a torn seam. She held his future, literally and figuratively, a future she didn't even know she controlled. "Come with me," Jose said. "I can fix it." She frowned, confused. "Fix it? How?" "I'll sew it. It won't take long." The lawyer, young, polished, clearly someone who had never needed a janitor for anything in her life, hesitated. "Are you sure?" He nodded once, steady, confident. "Trust me." Something in his voice made her follow. Maybe it was the calmness. Maybe it was the urgency. Or maybe, deep down, she simply needed someone to step in at that moment. Even if that someone wasn't who she expected. Jose guided her to the small maintenance room he used as a break area. It wasn't glamorous, an aging table, a metal cabinet, fluorescent lights humming overhead. But it was quiet, and it was hidden enough to preserve her dignity. She handed him the garment reluctantly. "If this goes wrong, I'm blaming you," she joked nervously. Jose smiled, threading a needle with practiced ease. "It won't, I promise." He worked quickly, hands steady from a lifetime of fixing what everyone else broke or threw away. She watched him, not the way people normally watch janitors, with impatience or indifference, but with genuine curiosity, almost disbelief. "You know," she said softly, "most people wouldn't stop to help." "Anyone would have helped," Jose replied, but she shook her head. "Not really." He didn't argue. Some truths were best left floating unsaid. When he finished, the seam looked perfect, cleaner than before even. She slipped the pants back on behind a small privacy curtain. When she emerged, she looked relieved, transformed by something as simple as the absence of panic. "It's perfect," she said, astonished. "Thank you, really." Jose nodded, already collecting his things. "I'm glad it helped. I should get back. I have a long day." She opened her mouth as if to say more, but he was already pushing his cart back into the hallway, disappearing long before she could ask his name. Long before she would realize that the kindness of a janitor, the kind of kindness most people overlook, was about to place him directly into the center of the most important decision she would make that day. Because upstairs, in a conference room lit by ambition and polished shoes, a once-in-a-year evaluation was about to begin, an evaluation for a junior lawyer position that could change a life forever, a position Jose had secretly applied for, and shockingly earned a place in. She didn't know it. He didn't know she would be part of the process, and neither of them knew that the small act of kindness they shared minutes earlier would collide violently with ambition, pride, and prejudice later that morning. But that collision, the one none of them saw coming, would reveal the truth about who deserved a future in that building and who didn't. It would expose the character of people who thought status protected them. It would force the entire organization to decide whether justice meant anything at all. And before the day was over, someone in that building would face consequences they never imagined. But for now, all Jose knew was this: he had helped a stranger, and that stranger would soon be holding his entire future in her hands. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, releasing Jose into a different world than the one he cleaned each morning. The upper floors felt colder, more polished, built for people who carried degrees and briefcases instead of mops and toolboxes. Every time he stepped here, even just to empty a trash bin, he felt eyes slide over him like he didn't belong, like he was part of the furniture, visible, functional, but never truly seen. But today was different. Today he wasn't holding a broom. Today he was holding a chance, thin, fragile, nearly impossible, but still a chance. The junior lawyer evaluation happened only once a year. The firm advertised it anonymously, allowed open exam submissions, and then quietly selected the top 3 scorers for the final in-person test. Against every unspoken rule of the building, Jose had submitted his application months ago, at night, in secret, with borrowed textbooks and sheer stubbornness, and somehow, he had made the cut. He replayed that fact in his mind like a miracle he still didn't fully believe. As he approached the conference room, voices drifted through the doorway, polished, confident, the kind of voices that sounded like they belonged inside a courtroom. "Alejandro is sure they picked the top of the top," someone said. "She's expecting excellence today." "They're brilliant," another replied, "especially the girl from San Marco University, top graduate, impeccable resume." "And Paul?" "His experience is stronger than anyone's. He's practically guaranteed a position." No one mentioned a third name, certainly not his. Jose hesitated at the doorway, adjusting his shirt, hoping the small mark of dust on his sleeve wasn't too obvious. He had planned to arrive early, planned to sit quietly, planned to go unnoticed until it was time to speak. But helping the lawyer that morning had cost precious minutes, and in a building like this, minutes mattered. "Good morning," he offered as he stepped inside. A few heads turned, a few brows lifted, but only one expression was truly recognizable: the shock on the faces of the 2 candidates already seated. It wasn't just surprise, it was offense. "What are you doing here?" the woman asked, her tone slicing through the air like a cold blade. Jose straightened his posture. "I'm here for the final evaluation. I was selected." A moment of stillness, then a faint, humorless laugh. "Selected for this? Are you sure you're in the right room?" Jose's throat tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "Yes, I submitted the written exam. My score qualified." The man beside her gave him a look that wasn't even hostile. It was worse. It was dismissive. "This evaluation is for legal candidates." "I know." Another pause, another exchange of looks. Then the woman leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "You mean to tell me that out of all the applicants, you, someone who doesn't even work in this department, scored high enough to be here?" Jose nodded once. "Steady. That's right." Silence swept the room, thick and tense, until a soft, familiar voice cut through it. "He did," the supervisor announced as she entered. "Mr. Jimenez's test met all the requirements." She said it without hesitation, without apology. And yet the air shifted again, this time with disbelief so strong it bordered on outrage. "But he's the janitor," the woman whispered, as though the word itself disqualified his intelligence. "He's a candidate," the supervisor corrected gently, "and today, All candidates will be evaluated equally. Jose exhaled slowly, gratitude threading through his breath. But even with those words, he could feel the invisible line drawn around him, a boundary the other two believed he had no right to cross. He took a seat at the far end of the table, quietly arranging his notes. His palms were warm, but his focus sharpened. He had worked too hard for this, too long. He wouldn't let anyone take it from him. The supervisor opened a folder. Before we begin, I'd like to remind you all that this firm is evaluating not only your knowledge, but also your judgment, your capacity to interpret situations beyond what is written, your ability to balance ethics and law. Jose absorbed every word. That balance, that delicate space between rules and humanity, was where he had always found clarity. As the supervisor continued briefing them, Jose noticed something strange across the table. The woman candidate staring him down, not with curiosity, but with irritation, as if his presence alone was an inconvenience. "Just so we're clear," she said quietly but not quietly enough, "being late to an evaluation like this is incredibly unprofessional." "I know," Jose replied evenly. "Something unexpected came up." "Unexpected?" she scoffed. "If this were an actual trial, you'd already have lost." Jose's jaw tightened, not because she was wrong, but because she didn't know. She didn't know the reason he was late was sitting only a few rooms away, still unaware of how much she had already shaped this day. But he didn't defend himself. Not yet. The time for explanations would come. The time for justice would come. And when it did, every person in that room would see him differently. But not because he demanded respect, because he would earn it. The supervisor tapped her pen once against the table, signaling the official beginning. "Let's start the evaluation." And just like that, the janitor, ignored, underestimated, uninvited by everyone but Merritt, sat up straighter and prepared to prove he deserved a seat no one ever meant for him to claim. The room settled into a still, almost ceremonial quiet. 3 candidates, 1 supervisor, a single folder that carried the weight of someone's future, maybe even someone's redemption. And beneath that quiet, an undercurrent of tension pulsed, stretching thin between them like a wire ready to snap. The supervisor placed her glasses on the table and looked at each of them in turn. Her gaze was steady, but there was something sharper beneath it, something evaluative, probing, as if she were searching not only for knowledge but for character. "Let's begin," she said. "Your first question is not about statutes or codes. It's about perspective." She paused, and suddenly everyone leaned in. "In your opinion," she continued, "what should a judge seek first, the strict application of the law or the pursuit of justice?" The woman candidate sat up straighter, confidence radiating off her like perfume. "The law," she answered quickly. "A judge must apply the law above all else. Justice is the consequence of the law being upheld." "Same," her colleague added. "Objectivity comes from adherence to the rules. Justice can't exist without the law guiding it." Jose listened, absorbing their words, the way they delivered them. Clean, mechanical, rehearsed, like lines memorized for an exam instead of truths they had wrestled with in the real world. Then the supervisor turned to him. "And you, Mr. Jimenez?" Jose met her eyes, calm, thoughtful. "A judge should seek both, upholding the law while pursuing justice." The woman candidate scoffed softly, unable to hide her irritation. But Jose didn't look her way. He kept his focus on the supervisor. "The law is the structure," he continued, "but justice is the purpose. If you remove one from the other, you lose both." The supervisor tilted her head slightly, curiosity igniting in her expression. "Explain." Jose's voice remained even. "If you enforce the law without considering justice, you risk harming people who don't deserve punishment. And if you chase justice without respecting the law, you create chaos, because justice becomes whatever someone feels in the moment." A beat of thoughtful silence followed. Then he added softly, Justice should never punish misfortune, only wrongdoing. For a moment, even the two candidates fell quiet. But the supervisor wasn't finished. She flipped to the next page, her tone shifting from philosophical to sharply practical. Scenario number 2. Everyone straightened again. A father steals medicine for his sick child. The act is recorded. He confesses. Legally, he is clearly guilty of theft, but the child would have died without it. Should the judge declare him guilty or not? The woman candidate answered before anyone else could speak. Guilty. Theft is theft. The intention doesn't erase the crime. Her colleague nodded, adding quickly, exactly. A judge must apply the law. Sympathy can't interfere with legality. Then the supervisor looked at Jose. And your view? Jose inhaled calmly. He is guilty. Immediately, both candidates smirked, as if he had finally given an answer they approved of. But Jose wasn't finished. Guilty, he repeated, but not irredeemable. The judge should acknowledge the crime while also recognizing the circumstances. The law allows for proportional sentencing. His punishment should reflect necessity, not malice. The supervisor leaned back slightly. Meaning? Meaning, Jose replied, that punishment should never be harsher than the humanity of the situation. Extreme need is not an excuse, but it is a context. His answer settled over the room like a quiet revelation. Balanced, fair, and undeniably human. The woman candidate shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Her confidence faltered just a fraction. The supervisor, however, gave nothing away. She simply turned to the final scenario. A woman forgets her umbrella in a cafe. Hours later, a man finds it, uses it, and discovers a winning lottery ticket worth $1 million inside. He claims the prize. She returns and demands it back. Who is entitled to the winnings? The woman candidate responded almost instantly. The man. Possession. Good faith. Even split it if necessary. But legally, he has the stronger claim. Her colleague nodded vigorously, but Jose looked thoughtful, quiet. When the supervisor finally addressed him, he spoke with a clarity that felt almost inevitable. The prize belongs to the woman. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. Explain. The umbrella wasn't abandoned. It was forgotten. Ownership never changed. The man acted in good faith, yes, but once the true owner exists, good faith possession no longer grants permanent rights. He paused, his tone stronger now. If he keeps the ticket, it becomes unjust enrichment. Fortune does not override rightful ownership. For the first time that morning, complete silence filled the room. Not the tense kind, but the kind that appeared when something undeniable had been spoken. The two candidates exchanged uneasy looks. Because it wasn't just Jose's answers that stood out. It was the way he delivered them. Without arrogance, without rushing, without performing for approval. He spoke like someone who understood the real purpose behind every rule. Someone who had lived life on both sides of fairness. Someone who deserved a place here. When the supervisor finally rose from her chair, she didn't hide her reaction. There was respect in her eyes, genuine, deliberate, unforced. "We will take a short break," she announced. "I'll return shortly to announce the final results." As she left the room, the door clicked softly behind her. And in that echoing silence, the truth settled over the table. Two candidates had brought credentials, but only one had brought wisdom. Only one had unmasked the true meaning of justice. And none of them, not even Jose himself, understood just how much that truth was about to cost him. The break room emptied slowly, but tension stayed behind like a stubborn shadow clinging to the walls. The two other candidates whispered in the corner, exchanging quick glances toward the door, toward the hallway, toward wherever Jose had gone during the short recess. Something in their expressions had shifted. Not fear, not respect, but calculation. They had come into the evaluation expecting competition, certainly, but they had never imagined this competition. A janitor outsmarting them, outshining them, making them look unprepared after years of schooling and polished resumes. Unacceptable. The woman candidate tapped her manicured nails against the counter, each click louder than the last. "If he's chosen," she muttered, "do you have any idea how that will look? How that will reflect on us? On this program?" Her colleague nodded, jaw tight. "He shouldn't even be here. This isn't his world. And yet he's winning." Her tone sharpened. "If the supervisor names him the top candidate, do you understand what that means? Everything we've worked for? Gone," he finished bitterly, "over a janitor with a lucky guess or two." They didn't dare say it out loud, but the truth simmered between them. Jose hadn't guessed anything. His answers were too precise, too insightful, too grounded. That scared them, because you can't dismiss real talent. You can only sabotage it. When they saw him step out of the restroom at the end of the hallway, the woman straightened her blazer and forced a polite smile. "There you are," she called. "We were wondering where you went." Jose nodded politely, not reading the undertone in her voice. "Just needed a moment." "Of course," she said smoothly. "We all did. The test was exhausting." Then she gestured casually toward the storage area beside the records room. "We were actually looking for the supply office. They told us refreshments were left in one of those rooms. Do you know which one?" Jose blinked. "Refreshments?" "Yes," she said, still smiling. "The supervisor requested them during the break. Could you help us? You know this part of the building better than we do." Her tone was honeyed, almost too sweet. Jose hesitated, instinct flickering. But he had spent years being helpful, years being the person everyone expected to step in when something needed finding or fixing. So he nodded. "Sure, let me check." The hallway was quiet as he approached the storage room. He twisted the handle. The door creaked. He stepped inside, scanning the shelves. Cleaning supplies, archived folders, spare office chairs, but nothing that resembled refreshments. He turned back, and in the last second before it happened, he heard a breath, a soft exhale, behind him. Then the door slammed, hard. His heartbeat stuttered. "Hey, hello?" No answer. He grabbed the handle and pulled, locked. He tried again, harder. The metal clanged with the force, but the lock didn't budge. A cold realization washed over him. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. Someone had locked him in. "Hello?" he called out, louder this time. "Is someone there?" Still nothing. From the other side of the door, footsteps retreated. Calm, purposeful, confident. He pounded his fist against the door until his arm shook. "Please, open the door. I have to get back." His voice echoed off the walls of the tiny room, small and desperate, swallowed by silence. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Time dissolved in the dark, narrow space. His breath grew uneven, not from fear, but from something heavier, something that hurt deeper than panic. They didn't believe he belonged in that evaluation. They didn't believe he deserved a chance. They didn't believe someone like him, someone who polished their floors and fixed their broken light switches, could ever surpass them. They didn't want justice. They wanted position. Every minute that ticked by was a reminder that prejudice didn't always shout. Sometimes it whispered behind closed doors and locked its victims away where no one could hear them. And somewhere else in the building, the supervisor would look at the clock, look at the empty chair, and assume he simply didn't return, that he gave up, that he didn't want it enough. But Jose wanted it more than anything he had wanted in years. He pressed his forehead against the door, closing his eyes. "Please," he whispered, voice breaking. "Someone." Far down the hallway, muffled voices floated through the cracks, doors opening, chairs scraping. The evaluation continuing without him, and then a gut punch, applause. Not loud, not joyous, just polite, final. A decision had been made, a verdict delivered in his absence. He sank to the floor, breath trembling. This was the cost of daring to dream beyond what people believed he was worth. not failure, but sabotage. And the worst part? No one knew where he was. No one even wondered. As the lights flickered above him, Jose leaned against the cold metal shelf and closed his eyes, unaware that one person, a woman with freshly sewn pants and lingering gratitude, was about to realize something was very, very wrong. And when she did, everything those two candidates tried to bury would rise. Alejandra stepped out of the conference room still carrying the weight of the evaluation in her chest. The results had been announced. The two top candidates smiling proudly as though the world had finally aligned with what they always believed about themselves, that they were destined to win. But something about the victory felt off. She tried to brush it away, tried to convince herself the supervisor must have had good reason, yet the thought clung to her like static. Where was he? The janitor who had saved her morning. The candidate who had stunned the room with answers full of depth and insight. The man who, despite being late, had carried himself with a calmness she couldn't ignore. José Daniel. He never returned after the break. Maybe he quit. Maybe he panicked. Maybe the pressure got to him. Those were the explanations the others offered, casual and dismissive. But none of them made sense to her, not after the way he had spoken earlier. Not after the certainty in his voice, not after the quiet determination in his eyes. Someone like that doesn't run. As she made her way down the hallway, her steps slowed. A strange unease crept up her spine, the kind that whispered something was wrong long before the mind could explain why. Then she heard it, a sound so faint she almost dismissed it. Bang, bang, bang. 3 dull thuds spaced apart, muffled by walls and storage shelves, and a heavy industrial door. Alejandra froze. She listened again. Silence. Then, bang. Her pulse jumped. It didn't sound like machinery, didn't sound like a falling box. It sounded like someone. She moved toward the noise, heels clicking sharply now, urgency building with every step. As she approached the storage area, she heard it clearly. "Help, please, someone!" Her blood ran cold. She grabbed the handle. It didn't move. "Hello?" she called. "Who's in there?" A breathless voice trembled from inside. "Please, open the door." Her eyes widened. She knew that voice. "Jose?" A beat of stunned silence. Then, "Yes, please, it's me." Adrenaline surged through her veins. She twisted the knob once more, still locked. Without a second thought, she sprinted down the hall, snatched the master key from the emergency panel, and rushed back. The key scraped inside the lock. A hard click. The door swung open. Jose stumbled into the light, pale and sweating, his shirt wrinkled, dust clinging to his shoulders. He looked like someone pulled from a collapsed tunnel. Eyes wide, breath ragged, disbelief etched across his face. Alejandra stepped closer, catching him by the arm. "Oh my God, are you okay?" "Who locked you in there?" Jose swallowed hard, still trying to steady his breathing. I don't know for sure, but I think it was the two candidates." Her jaw clenched. "They did what?" "They asked me to help them look for something in the storage rooms. When I stepped in, someone shut the door, locked it. I tried yelling, banging, nothing." "Is that why you never came back?" she asked, voice tight with anger. He nodded faintly. "I thought I'd lost everything. I thought they already chose someone else." Alejandra inhaled deeply, trying to control the fire rising in her chest. She wasn't just angry, she was furious, not on principle, not on policy, but because this was wrong. This was cruelty hiding behind ambition. This was the kind of injustice the firm claimed to condemn, and yet it had happened right under their noses. "Listen to me," she said firmly, her voice gaining an edge Jose had never heard from her. "You are not losing anything. Not today, not like this." He blinked in confusion. "But the results, they already chose." "That doesn't matter," she interrupted. "Not when the decision was based on fraud." Jose shook his head. "But I have no proof. It's just my word." "That's enough," she said, straightening. "Your word is enough for me. And tomorrow morning it'll be enough for everyone else too. His brows tightened. Tomorrow morning. Yes, she said with absolute certainty. Meet me at 8 a.m. sharp, in the main meeting room. For what? Her eyes held a fierce calm, a look he recognized now as the same look she had worn when she'd collected herself that morning, with ripped pants and humiliation looming. For justice, she said softly. For truth. For the position you already earned. He stared at her, speechless. And what about the others? He asked quietly. She exhaled, expression darkening. I'll handle them. For the first time since the door had slammed shut on him, hope cracked through Jose's chest like light through broken blinds. Why are you helping me? He whispered. Alejandra hesitated, not because she didn't know the answer, but because the truth held more weight than she expected. Because you helped me, she said, when no one else would have, because what was done to you was dishonest. And because fairness still matters. Jose fought the burn rising behind his eyes. She squeezed his arm gently. Don't lose heart. Don't lose faith. You show up tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Don't be late. Yes, ma'am. She smiled faintly. Good. Commitment. And with that, she walked away, back straight, steps sharp, a storm gathering beneath her calm exterior. Behind her, Jose watched, still catching his breath, still shaking slightly. He had thought everything was over, but now the truth had surfaced, and the reckoning was only beginning. The next morning, the Rivera and Associates building felt different. Not louder, not busier, just charged. As if the walls themselves knew something was about to unravel, something long buried beneath polished speeches, perfect resumes, and carefully curated reputations. Jose arrived 15 minutes early, pressed shirt, steady breath, a quiet resolve in his chest that hadn't been there before. Today wasn't about revenge. Today was about reclaiming what was stolen. He paused outside the meeting room doors, the same ones he had approached the day before with uncertainty and nerves. But this time, he didn't feel small. He didn't feel out of place. He felt, strangely, ready. Inside, murmurs of confusion filled the room. The two candidates sat stiffly at the table, their expressions tight. They had been summoned without explanation, and the discomfort showed. "What's going on?" the woman demanded under her breath. "This wasn't on the schedule," her colleague added. Then the doors opened. Alejandra stepped in with the calm authority of someone who wasn't just speaking as a lawyer, but as a witness, as a force of truth no one anticipated. Behind her, Jose entered quietly. He didn't have to say a word. The tension said everything. The supervisor frowned in confusion. "Mr. Jimenez? You weren't expected this morning." "Oh, he was," Alejandra replied smoothly. "By me." Her tone made everyone sit a little straighter. The supervisor gestured cautiously. "What is this about?" Alejandra placed a thick folder on the table. About an injustice, one that occurred yesterday during the evaluation. A flicker of panic crossed the woman candidate's face. "Excuse me, you can't just—" But Alejandra raised her hand, silencing her with nothing but sheer composure. "Yesterday," she began, "one participant never returned after the break, a detail we all noticed. A detail everyone assumed meant he quit." Her eyes locked onto the two candidates, calm, unwavering, unblinking. "But assumptions aren't facts, and facts," she said, tapping the folder, "are exactly what we're here to deal with." The supervisor looked down at the folder. "What facts?" Alejandra opened it slowly. "Evidence of procedural fraud and unethical conduct during a formal evaluation." The man candidate scoffed. "That's ridiculous. What evidence?" She smiled, but not kindly. "Your reactions are telling, but let's not waste time." She turned to the supervisor, voice firm. "Yesterday morning, Jose Daniel was misled into entering a storage room. The door was shut. The door was locked. He was trapped for the remainder of the evaluation." The woman candidate's face drained of color. "That's absurd," she tried. "You can't prove that." Alejandra stepped forward. Actually, I can. I was the one who found him. I was the one who heard him screaming for help behind a locked door. The room went silent. Completely, utterly silent. The supervisor's gaze sharpened. Is that true, Mr. Jimenez? Jose nodded once. Yes, ma'am. Why didn't you report this immediately? The supervisor asked softly. Because I had no proof, he said. Just suspicion. Alejandra stepped in. But now he has a witness, me, and I'm willing to testify to what I saw, what I heard, and what I opened. The woman candidate swallowed hard. You can't accuse us like this. Accuse you? Alejandra echoed, her voice sharpening. No, the facts accuse you. The supervisor sat back, processing the information. This is a serious allegation. It's not an allegation, Alejandra replied. It's a violation, one that directly affected the outcome of the evaluation. The room held its breath. Finally, the supervisor folded her hands. If what Ms. Alejandra says is true, then yesterday's results are invalid. The two candidates shot up from their chairs simultaneously. You can't do that. This will ruin our careers. Alejandra's expression didn't waver. Your actions did that, not us. The supervisor turned to Jose. Mr. Jimenez, you were unfairly removed from the evaluation. Your answers yesterday were exceptional. Your conduct showed professionalism, humility, and integrity under pressure, qualities we value deeply in this firm. She closed the folder. Therefore, the position of junior lawyer is rightfully yours. Jose froze. For a moment, he wondered if he heard wrong. For a moment, he wondered if the room had blurred around him. For a moment, just a moment, he let himself breathe. The woman candidate slammed her hand on the table. This is insane. You're choosing him, a janitor? Alejandra stepped closer, eyes like steel. Yes, because he earned it. Because he outperformed both of you. Because he understands the law and justice. Something neither of you proved yesterday. Her voice lowered, cold enough to echo. And because no amount of sabotage or arrogance can erase merit. The supervisor nodded approvingly. Welcome to the team, Mr. Jimenez. Jose felt his chest tighten, not with fear, not with anxiety, but with something warmer, something he had forgotten he was allowed to feel. Pride. I won't disappoint you, he said quietly. I know you won't, the supervisor replied. As he shook her hand, Alejandra stepped beside him. You know, she said softly, I have your first case for you. He turned to her, surprised. Already? She smiled, real, warm, the kind of smile that carried meaning. Yes, I'm defending a janitor who deserves justice. Thought it was fitting to start with someone who reminds me of why the law exists. Jose exhaled, grounding himself. A janitor yesterday, a lawyer today. But the same man he had always been. Justice had finally been served, not through power, not through privilege, but through truth. And as he stood in the center of the room, finally seen for the first time in years, Jose realized something profound. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness doesn't just change someone else's day. Sometimes it changes your entire destiny.